welcome to the deep dive. Today we're embarking on a really fascinating journey, not just across ancient landscapes, but sort of into the minds of prehistoric hunter-gatherers. We're going to explore their, well, surprising choices in tool-making materials, sometimes beautiful ones, and the incredible distances they traveled to get them. Our mission for this deep dive is to really unpack the story behind these stone tools found in Eswatini, that's formerly Swaziland. We'll look at how researchers used some pretty advanced science to trace these materials back to their origins and what that tells us about human behavior like tens of thousands of years ago.
Yeah, what's truly illuminating here, I think, is how these modern techniques are revealing just how sophisticated ancient people were, their choices, their knowledge of the environment. It's impressive. This wasn't just about finding any rock that worked. It seems to be about preference, maybe even symbolic value.
Okay, let's get into it. We're working with some great research today, mainly a study called Decoding Hunter-Gatherer Knowledge and Selective Choice of Lithic Raw Materials, led by Dr. Gregor D. Bader. And we're also pulling from a summary, Stone Age Journeys for Colorful Tools. Both look closely at old collections from the Lobamba Museum and some newly found raw material sources. You know, when you picture Stone Age tools, you probably think, I don't know, dull gray rocks, right? Functional, maybe not much to look at. But what these researchers found in Eswatini tells a much more, well, vibrant story. These weren't just any old rocks, were they? Can you paint a picture for us?
Absolutely. So the study first kind of refined the terminology. Materials just called chert before they got more specific. Using something called a neutron activation analysis, or NAA, they pinpointed three main types: a really striking red jasper, a sort of emerald green chalcedony, and a pure black chert. And they even found the actual primary sources, the outcrops for the red and green stuff in the Mugweza Valley, plus black chert pebbles in the rivers.
Neutron activation analysis. That sounds pretty high-tech. How does that actually work, this geochemical fingerprinting?
It's a really powerful method. Basically, you take a tiny sample of the stone tool, almost microscopic. You irradiate it with neutrons, and this makes the atomic nuclei react and give off radiation in a unique pattern. That's the fingerprint. It shows the exact mix of elements and isotopes. Then you compare that fingerprint from the tool to fingerprints from known rock deposits.
Wow.
Yeah, and you can often pinpoint the exact origin. It is destructive, technically, but you need such a tiny amount, and the accuracy is, well, excellent.
Okay, so these fingerprints are distinct enough to say this specific tool came from that specific place.
Pretty much, yeah. Or at least that specific geological formation or river system.
So what did these colorful stones actually look like? What made them stand out?
Well, the Mugweza green chalcedony, it's got nickel and chromium, a bit like chrysoprase, which gives it this amazing emerald green color, really vibrant. The Mugweza red jasper is packed with iron, hematite, up to maybe 14.5% iron. That's why it's so bright red. Often has these fine lines, sort of laminations and matte look. And the Mugweza black chert, it's a very pure silicate, super fine-grained crystals. Its black color likely comes from, carbon materials mixed in. Good quality stuff for knapping, for making tools.
Okay, so beautiful, distinct materials.
Right. But then there's another twist. They also found this other red material. They called it red chert of unknown origin. It's deep red, but chemically different from the Mugweza jasper. Less iron, more impurities, and actually not as good for making tools. Poorer knapping quality.
Interesting.
Yeah, and it was the main material at one site, Sifiso, which suggests maybe a local source there, perhaps in the Lobombo Mountains. But it also turned up at another site, Sibe, quite a way west, which implies it was transported a long distance east to west, even though it wasn't, like, the best quality stuff technically.
That is fascinating. Why move lower quality stuff so far? I might get back to that. But first, we know what they used and where it came from.
Yeah.
Now, the really mind-bending part for me, how far did people actually travel to get these specific stones?
Yeah, this is where the journeys part comes in. The researchers looked at 4 sites, Lalakale, Sibebe, Sifiso, and Gambeni. They used GIS analysis, least cost path modeling. It basically calculates the most efficient walking routes, taking hills and terrain into account. And their calculations showed people were traveling between 20 and, get this, 100 kilometers to collect these specific red, green, and black materials.
20 to 100 kilometers?
Yeah.
Just for a rock. I mean, that's a serious trek. You're not just popping down the road.
Yeah.
Could rivers maybe have done some of the heavy lifting?
Yeah.
Wash these stones closer to the sites?
That's a really important question, and they looked into it carefully. They did hydrological analysis, looked at the river dynamics, and it turns out river transport for big enough chunks to make tools like 6 to 25 centimeters across was really only plausible for one site. Tlalucali.
Okay.
Yeah, Tlalucali is right on the Komati River, and you do find red and green chert pebbles in the riverbed there. Makes sense. But for the other sites, like Incombeni and Sifiso, they're up to 100 kilometers away by river. The analysis showed it's just highly unlikely the river could carry large usable pieces that far.
Right.
So connecting the dots, it means the materials found at Sibebe, Sifiso, and Incombeni almost certainly got there because people carried them over those, considerable distances, which implies some pretty sophisticated skills, right? Landscape knowledge, navigation, planning.
Definitely. So what does this suggest about how they lived? Were these, like, special, dedicated quarrying trips? Or part of a larger pattern of movement, maybe even trade?
Well, if we look at ethnographic data from more recent hunter-gatherer groups,
Yeah.
their typical daily foraging range is maybe 7 to 10 kilometers. And when the whole group moves camp, that's usually around, say, 23 to 25 kilometers on average.
Okay.
The distances here 30, 50, up to 100 kilometers for these materials at Sibe, Sifiso, and Combini. That's well beyond typical daily or even camp moving ranges. So it strongly suggests one of two things. Either these were targeted expeditions, part of a complex logistical system where people made specific long trips just to get this material, or maybe the materials were acquired through social networks, gift exchange, maybe early forms of trade with other groups living closer to the sources. Either way, it's complex.
Wow. Okay, so they're making conscious choices traveling huge distances, but the story gets even more nuanced, right? Because their preferences actually changed over time.
Exactly. This is where the Sibebe rock shelter site is really key. It has a long, well-dated sequence covering both the Middle Stone Age, the MSA, and the later Stone Age, the LSA. We're talking a span from about 40,000 years ago up to maybe 1,600 years ago. And this long view lets us see clear shifts in which materials they favor.
Right. So walk us through that. What was popular back in the Middle Stone Age?
Okay, so in the MSA layers, particularly the later phases, say between roughly 22,000 and 40,000 years ago, that bright red jasper, it was hardly used, sometimes completely absent. Instead, they were using the green chalcedony much more, along with the black chert and also some white chert. Interestingly, in the really early MSA layers, they found green chalcedony cores, the raw blocks they were shaping, showing they were making tools from it right there at the site. But it wasn't typically used for the classic MSA tool types, like those carefully shaped bifacial or unifacial points. For those, black chert seems to have been the preferred material.
Okay, so green and black were big in the MSA. Then comes the later Stone Age, the LSA. Did things change?
Dramatically. In the more recent LSA layers, particularly the last few thousand years, so about 1,600 to 3,400 years ago, the preference flips. Suddenly, red jasper becomes the most common chert type found, along with that other red chert of unknown origin. And what's also interesting, for this LSA period, they didn't find red jasper cores, suggesting they weren't starting the toolmaking process from scratch with red jasper at the site, but they were using it specifically to make LSE-style scrapers. Maybe they were bringing in preformed blanks or finished tools that they then maintained and resharpened.
How do we sort of measure this preference beyond just counting pieces? Is there a way to quantify how much they valued a material?
Yeah, that's a good point. The researchers used a metric called the Raw Material Retouch Index, or RMRI. It basically measures how much a tool made from a specific material was resharpened or reworked compared to how much of that material was initially brought to the site. Higher RMRI suggests more intensive use and maintenance, implying higher value. And in the LSA at Sibi, the red jasper had an RMRI of 6.4. That was way higher than any other material in any time period, including locally abundant stuff like quartz or hornfels, which were right there.
Wow, 6.4. That sounds significant.
It is. So you combine that high RMRI score with the evidence for long-distance transport. It really points to red jasper having a special high value for those LSA hunter-gatherers.
And just to circle back, the green chalcedony and the red jasper, their sources are in the same valley, right? Even mixed together in the river gravels near Tlalucali.
Exactly. They're geographically associated. Both were available.
So the fact that MSA people favored the green and LSA people favored the red, that really screams intentional choice, doesn't it? It wasn't just about what was easiest to grab.
It absolutely does. It strongly indicates a deliberate, selective choice, driven by something more than just availability or pure function. It's about preference. Now, we can only speculate on the exact symbolic meaning, of course, but other research often notes hunter-gatherers being drawn to colorful, shiny, visually appealing materials. What's cool here is that we can directly link that general observation to specific materials with known sources and transport distances. It highlights this outstanding value placed on certain visual qualities, even overriding the convenience of using local stone.
What an incredible deep dive this has been, just thinking about the choices, the journeys. It changes how you picture the Stone Age, really. We've seen how this precise geochemical science combined with landscape modeling can tell us so much, not just what tools they used, but why they chose them, and crucially, how far they went.
Yeah, we've pinpointed these unique fingerprints for the red jasper, the green chalcedony, the black chert, and learned they were carried, 20 to 100 kilometers, mostly by people, which implies really sophisticated planning, knowledge, maybe even social networks for exchange.
And then there's that fascinating shift over thousands of years, from preferring green chalcedony in the Middle Stone Age to this really clear, quantifiable preference for the vibrant red jasper in the later Stone Age. It suggests a special value, maybe symbolic, definitely aesthetic, placed on these specific colors.
Absolutely. And understanding this whole picture procurement, transport, evolving preferences, it gives us such a rare, nuanced glimpse into their world, into the complex decision-making, cultural values of these prehistoric communities. It really pushes us to think beyond just, the practical utility of a tool.
Hmm.
We have to consider the deeper meanings that might have been attached to objects, even everyday tools, in these ancient societies.
So maybe next time you pick up an interesting looking stone, just think about the potential journey it might represent, the story it could tell about human ingenuity, changing tastes, and maybe the idea that beauty, even in a tool, was worth traveling a very long way for. Thousands and thousands of years ago. What really stands out to you from all this? For me, I think it's that idea that aesthetic preference maybe could drive such incredible effort, that beauty mattered.